Captain Deho sat in the dimly lit communications center of Earth Defense Command, watching streams of data flow across multiple screens. The night shift was usually quiet, but tonight, something extraordinary had broken through their deep space monitoring systems. An alien transmission had been detected coming from a star system thousands of light years away, and the message was unlike anything humans had ever received. The universal translator worked slowly, processing the complex alien language into readable text. As the words appeared on his screen, Dehor's face grew pale with shock and anger. The message was a desperate plea for help from a dying civilization. The Vallani people were being systematically exterminated by something called the Chromax Empire, and they were begging any advanced species to save them from complete extinction. Without hesitation, Daiho forwarded the transmission directly to Admiral Yijun at Earth Defense Command, along with his own analysis of the situation. He included tactical data about the alien technologies mentioned in the message and his preliminary assessment that this was a genuine distress call, not some kind of trap or deception. The urgency in the alien voices convinced him that millions of innocent lives were at stake. Admiral Yijun received the message while reviewing reports in his office at 3 a.m. He read through the translation twice, then called an emergency meeting of Earth's top military commanders. Within 2 hours, the most experienced officers from every branch of service had assembled in the secure conference room, deep beneath the Defense Command headquarters. Commander Sujin arrived, first carrying classified files about humanity's newest military technologies. Her Special Operations Division had been developing advanced weapon systems specifically designed for space combat. She had been waiting for an opportunity to test these systems in real battle conditions, but never expected that opportunity to come in the form of defending innocent aliens from genocidal conquerors. Captain Haywan entered the room still wearing his flight suit after rushing from the orbital shipyards where he had been inspecting the newest additions to Earth's small but growing space fleet. His deep space fleet consisted of only 12 vessels, but they were equipped with the most advanced technology humanity could produce. Each ship represented years of innovation and the combined efforts of thousands of engineers and scientists. Dr. Myung brought her xenobiology team carrying hastily compiled reports about what little was known of alien species in that region of the galaxy. Her department had been studying intercepted alien communications for years, trying to understand the various civilizations that existed beyond Earth's solar system. The Vallani appeared to be a peaceful species focused on art and science, while the Chromax Empire was clearly a military conquest force. Admiral Yijun began the meeting by playing the complete alien transmission, allowing everyone to hear the desperation and fear in the Vallani voices. The sound of their dying civilization sent a chill through the room as hardened military officers listened to descriptions of cities burning and populations being slaughtered. The aliens were offering everything they possessed in exchange for any help that might arrive. The debate that followed was brief but intense. Some officers argued that Earth lacked the military strength to intervene in a galactic conflict. Humanity had only recently developed faster than light travel, and their weapons technology was considered primitive compared to advanced alien civilizations. They had no allies, no knowledge of galactic politics, and no understanding of the military forces they would face. Commander Sujin disagreed strongly with this assessment. She pointed out that Earth's military advantages did not come from superior technology, but from superior tactics, and training humans had evolved on a death world where survival required constant warfare against hostile environments, predatory animals, and natural disasters. This had produced warriors with capabilities that peaceful civilizations could not match. Or understand. Captain Haywan supported Sujin's position by presenting his analysis of human space combat doctrine. Earth vessels were designed for close-range fighting using tactics that no civilized species would consider acceptable. Human pilots were trained to ram enemy ships, use suicide attacks, and engage in boarding actions that other species found too dangerous to attempt. Dr. Myung added her assessment that the Chromax Empire had probably never encountered anything like human military psychology. Most galactic civilizations had evolved beyond primitive warfare, developing sophisticated technologies that kept battles at safe distances. Humans still fought like the predators. They had evolved to be using psychological warfare and brutal tactics that could break enemy morale. Admiral Yi Jun listened to all arguments, then made his decision with the authority that came from 30 years of military service. Earth would respond to the Volani distress call, not because they had the best technology or the largest fleet, but because they were the only species willing to fight back against bullies. He authorized an immediate military response to be launched within 72 hours. The mission would consist of 3 Earth vessels carrying everything humanity could spare for a desperate rescue operation. The flagship Soul Pride would transport a full battalion of Earth Marines under Colonel Taehyun, the most experienced combat officer in human military history. His troops were veterans of conflicts across Earth, and Luna trained in every form of warfare from urban combat to zero-gravity fighting. The destroyer Busan Thunder would carry advanced weapon systems designed by engineer Kyungmin, whose innovations had revolutionized human military technology. His plasma cannons, railguns, and defensive systems were crude compared to alien technology, but they were designed with human tactical doctrine in mind, focusing on devastating close-range firepower, rather than sophisticated long-distance precision. The support vessel Incheon Hope would bring medical supplies and trauma specialists led by Dr. Sora, whose emergency medical techniques had been developed during Earth's most brutal conflicts. Her team could perform surgery under combat conditions, keep wounded soldiers fighting, and treat injuries that would be fatal to members of more fragile species, as the fleet prepared for departure. Each crew member understood they were making history. This would be humanity's first major intervention in galactic affairs, their introduction to the wider community of intelligent species. They were representing not just Earth, but the entire concept of Deathworld evolution, and what it meant to be, shaped by constant struggle for survival. Captain Daeho ran final system checks on his communications equipment, knowing that his role would be crucial for coordinating with alien allies and gathering intelligence about enemy capabilities. He thought about his daughter Hyejin back on Earth attending university and dreaming of becoming an interstellar diplomat. She would grow up in a galaxy where humans had proven themselves willing to fight for justice. The 3 ships launched from Earth orbit. While crowds gathered to watch humanity reach for the stars with weapons in hand, they carried no diplomats, no trade goods, no offers of peaceful cooperation. They brought only soldiers, medical supplies, and the promise that someone in the galaxy was finally willing to fight back against genocidal empires as the fleet engaged their hyperspace drives for the dangerous journey across the galaxy. Admiral Yi Jun sent a final message to the unknown Volani survivors, telling them that help was coming from Earth. The message was simple but carried the weight of human determination behind every word. They would not arrive as saviors from an advanced civilization, but as warriors from a death world who had never learned to surrender. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Volani system and immediately encountered a scene of devastation that shocked even veteran soldiers who had witnessed the worst of human warfare. 3 of the 7 Volani worlds were completely dark, their surfaces glowing with the residual heat of planetary bombardment, while the remaining 4 showed scattered fires and massive atmospheric disturbances from ongoing attacks. Captain Daeho coordinated the tactical assessment from the bridge of Soul Pride, while his sensors painted a picture of systematic genocide across an entire star system. Massive Chromax warships patrolled between the dying worlds, hunting down refugee vessels and eliminating any signs of organized resistance. The alien empire had brought overwhelming force to ensure complete extermination of the Volani people. Commander Sujin studied the enemy fleet composition through her tactical displays, counting at least 40 Chromax vessels ranging from small patrol craft to massive dreadnought-class warships. Their technology appeared far superior to anything Earth possessed, with energy shields that shimmered around each hull and weapon systems that could crack planetary surfaces. The human fleet of 3 ships seemed impossibly outmatched. Engineer Kyungmin ran constant scans of the alien technology, trying to identify weaknesses in their designs. The Chromax ships were built for long-range combat using energy weapons that could strike targets across thousands of kilometers. Their defensive systems were designed to deflect similar energy attacks, while their hulls incorporated advanced materials that could absorb tremendous punishment. Dr. Mi-young monitored communications between the Chromax vessels, listening to their tactical chatter through translation programs. The alien commanders spoke with casual confidence about their ongoing extermination campaign, treating the destruction of an entire civilization as routine military exercise. They discussed resource extraction schedules and slave quotas with the same tone humans might use to plan a construction project. The Chromax fleet detected the human arrival within minutes of their emergence from hyperspace but showed no signs of concern or alarm. Commander Vorthak of the Chromax flagship Doombringer opened communications with the Earth vessels using standard galactic protocols. His image appeared on human screens, showing a tall reptilian creature with dark, scaled skin and cold predatory eyes. Vorthak spoke in the arrogant tone of someone accustomed to absolute dominance, telling the human commanders that they had entered Chromax territory during a legitimate conquest operation. He offered them one opportunity: to retreat immediately before his fleet added their primitive vessels to the growing collection of destroyed ships orbiting the Villani worlds. Captain Deho responded with calm professionalism that masked the burning anger he felt at witnessing the systematic slaughter of innocent people. He informed Vorthak that the human fleet had come to provide humanitarian assistance to the Villani survivors and would not withdraw until all civilians had been evacuated to safety. The Chromax commander found this response amusing and began explaining the reality of galactic politics to these backward newcomers. The Villani had been conquered, according to established imperial doctrine, and no survivors would be permitted to escape their technology. Resources and population belonged to the Chromax Empire, by right of superior military force. Vorthak continued his lecture about how primitive species should behave when encountering their betters in galactic civilization. He described how humans should be grateful for the lesson they were about to receive about the consequences of interfering in Chromax operations. Their ships would be destroyed quickly if they were fortunate or captured for study. If they proved interesting enough. Captain Deho listened to the entire arrogant speech without interruption, then delivered his response in a quiet voice that carried absolute conviction. He told Vorthak that humans had a different philosophy about bullies and genocidal maniacs. Earth had spent its entire history fighting creatures like the Chromax, and they had never learned to surrender to predators. The first engagement began exactly as Vorthak expected, with his energy weapons striking the human vessels at maximum range. His plasma beams impacted the primitive hulls and were absorbed by crude armor plating that should have been vaporized instantly. The Chromax commander was mildly surprised when the human ships continued advancing instead of breaking apart under his superior firepower. Colonel Taehyun had been waiting for this moment since the fleet departed Earth. His Marines were loaded into specially designed boarding pods that could penetrate enemy hulls through direct impact rather than relying on docking procedures. The pods were essentially guided missiles with human soldiers inside armored shells that could survive collision with enemy vessels as the human fleet closed to point-blank range. The Chromax crews began to show signs of confusion and concern. No civilized species engaged in combat at such close distances, where energy shields became less effective and ramming attacks became possible. Their tactical doctrine assumed that enemies would maintain safe separation and engage in long-range precision combat. The boarding pods launched from Sol Pride, just as Vorthak's flagship fired its main weapons array at what should have been fatal range. The human vessel took devastating damage but continued its attack run, while dozens of pods streaked toward the Chromax hull. Their guidance systems had been programmed with target points identified by engineer Kyung-min's scans focusing on critical systems and command areas. Vorthak watched in shock as human soldiers in advanced combat armor began cutting through his hull with tools designed for breaching operations. His crew had never experienced boarding attacks and were unprepared for warfare inside their own ship. The corridors that had been designed for comfort and efficiency became death traps when filled with armed humans. The Chromax weapons that were so devastating in space combat proved useless in close quarters fighting. Their energy rifles were too powerful for shipboard use and would damage their own systems while there. Defensive training focused on repelling attacks from other civilized species. Human Marines used weapons that seemed primitive, but were perfectly suited for brutal close-range combat. Colonel Taehyun's troops moved through the alien ship with methodical precision using tactics developed from centuries of human warfare on Earth. Their weapons included projectile rifles that could penetrate alien armor, explosive charges designed to breach bulkheads and combat knives for silent elimination of sentries. The sounds of human warfare echoed through corridors that had never known violence. Dr. Sora and her medical teams worked frantically to keep wounded humans fighting, using combat stimulants, advanced surgical techniques, and portable life support systems. Her battlefield medicine had been developed during Earth's most brutal conflicts where soldiers needed to continue fighting despite injuries that would incapacitate members of more fragile species. The battle continued as more human boarding parties secured critical systems throughout the Chromax flagship, while Captain Haywen coordinated space combat from his destroyer. His weapons might have been primitive compared to alien technology, but they were used with tactics that no civilized species would consider. His pilots performed ramming attacks, suicide runs, and kamikaze strikes that left the Chromax fleet in chaos. Within 6 hours, the mighty Chromax fleet was either destroyed retreating or captured by a handful of primitive human vessels. The survivors broadcast desperate warnings about these terrifying new enemies who fought like demons and seemed completely unafraid of death. Commander Vorthak barricaded himself in his command center, sending panicked messages to the Chromax High Command about the Deathworlders who had come to answer the Villani plea for help. The beautiful crystal cities of Villani Prime burned under the red sky as massive warships rained destruction from above. Elder Thesara pressed her thin blue hands against the observation window of the underground command center, watching her world's civilization crumble into ash and ruin. The Chromax Empire had come to their peaceful star system, like a plague of death bringing nothing but terror and conquest. For 300 years, the Villani people had lived in harmony across 7 worlds, building magnificent crystal spires that sang with the wind and creating art that captured starlight itself. Their technology focused on beauty and peace, not war or violence. They had no weapons, no armies, no concept of the brutal reality that existed. Beyond their protected space, the galaxy had seemed so vast and full of wonder until the day the Chromax fleet arrived. Thesara remembered that terrible morning when their long-range sensors detected the approaching ships. The Villani had been excited, thinking these were new friends from distant stars coming to share knowledge and culture. They prepared welcome ceremonies and gifts of their finest crystal sculptures. The children practiced songs in languages they hoped to learn. Their greatest mistake was believing that all intelligent life shared their values of peace and cooperation. The Chromax ships had not responded to their greeting messages. Instead, they began systematic bombardment of every population center on every world. The crystal cities that took centuries to grow were shattered in minutes. Millions of Villani died in the first day, as plasma beams melted their homes and the ground beneath them. The survivors fled underground to shelters never designed for war hiding, like frightened animals, while their entire civilization collapsed above them. Now only scattered groups remained hiding in deep caves and ancient mining tunnels. The Chromax ground forces hunted them with mechanical efficiency, killing any Villani they found and taking others as slaves for their empire. Elder Thesara was the last member of the High Council still alive after 6 others had died, trying to organize resistance against an enemy they could not understand or fight. The command center around her held the most advanced technology the Villani possessed, but it was all designed for communication art and peaceful exploration. The quantum computers that once calculated poetry now tracked the approaching footsteps of Chromax soldiers. The crystal matrices that once created beautiful light shows now monitored the death of their world through hidden sensors scattered across the surface. Thesara looked at the faces of the 43 Villani who remained in the shelter with her. They were artists, scientists, teachers, and healers who had never imagined they would spend their final days hiding from monsters. Their large purple eyes held no anger or hatred, only confusion and sadness. They did not understand why anyone would choose destruction over creation, why any species would find joy in causing pain. The eldest among them was Curator Wellum, who had spent 2 centuries preserving their historical records. He approached Thesara with slow, careful steps, his crystal staff clicking against the stone floor. In his arms he carried their most precious artifact, a memory crystal containing the complete history of Villani civilization, including their art, music, philosophy, and scientific discoveries. Wellum spoke in the soft musical tones of their language telling Thessara that their people deserved to be remembered, even if none of them survived the next few days. He had compressed everything into a single transmission that could be sent across the galaxy, to any civilization advanced enough to receive it. Perhaps some other peaceful species would learn from their example, or at least remember that the Villani had existed. Thessara took the crystal, feeling its smooth surface warm against her palms. Inside, this small object lived the entire soul of her people. Their dreams, their hopes, their incredible achievements in art and science. She thought about all the beautiful things they had created, the songs that could make flowers bloom, the crystal gardens that captured and reflected starlight in impossible patterns, the healing chambers that could mend both body and spirit. The Chromax had no interest in any of these wonders. They saw only resources to exploit and populations to enslave. Their empire had grown by consuming other civilizations, leaving nothing but dead worlds and broken peoples in their wake. The Villani were simply the latest victims in a chain of conquest that stretched across half the galaxy. Young Sarah approached from the communications station, her face pale with exhaustion. She had been monitoring galactic channels for days, hoping to find some sign that other civilizations might help them. The few responses they received were expressions of sympathy, but no offers of assistance. Every advanced species in their region of space feared the Chromax Empire too much to risk military intervention. Thessara made her decision knowing it was probably futile, but unable to simply wait for death. She ordered Sarah to activate their most powerful deep space transmitter, a massive crystal array that could send messages across thousands of light years. The power required would drain their remaining energy reserves and probably reveal their location to any Chromax forces still searching for survivors. The transmission would be a desperate plea for help sent to every corner of the galaxy, reaching any species advanced enough to travel between stars. They would offer everything they possessed, their technology, their knowledge, their culture, anything that might convince someone to send military aid against the Chromax fleet. Thessara began recording the message, speaking slowly and clearly, so the universal translators would convert her words accurately. She explained who the Villani were, what they had built, and what was being destroyed. She described the Chromax attack, the systematic genocide, the desperate situation of the survivors. She offered everything her people had created in exchange for protection from extinctions. She spoke. Thessara looked around the shelter at the faces of her people, knowing this might be their final act as a civilization. She talked about their crystal cities, their peaceful philosophy, their contributions to art and science. She begged any listening civilization to remember them even if no help could come. She asked only that some record of the Villani people survive in the memory of others. The message was loaded into the quantum transmitter along with Wellham's historical archives and samples of their greatest cultural achievements. Sarah began the transmission sequence, sending their desperate call across the vastness of space toward any civilization that might care enough to respond. What Thessara did not know was that her message would travel farther than expected, reaching a small blue world at the edge of galactic civilization, where a species called humans had recently developed the technology to receive interstellar communications. These humans lived on what Galactic databases classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet so dangerous that survival required constant warfare against a hostile environment. The Villani plea for help would reach Earth, where people who had learned to fight for everything they possessed would hear the cry of a peaceful civilization facing extinction. And unlike the advanced species who feared the Chromax Empire, the humans would respond not with sympathy, but with action. Word spread across the galaxy through interstellar communication networks as various alien civilizations monitored the unprecedented situation developing in Villani space. The unknown species, called humans, had not only defeated a Chromax conquest fleet but were now preparing to challenge the Empire directly instead of seeking diplomatic solutions or defensive positions. The Chromax High Command convened emergency sessions on their capital world as reports arrived from the fleeing survivors of Vorthak's fleet. The enemy descriptions seemed impossible to believe. A primitive species with crude technology had overwhelmed sophisticated Imperial forces using tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare supreme. Commander Draknoth studied the battlefield recordings with growing alarm as he watched human forces engage in close quarters combat that no galactic species had practiced for thousands of years. The boarding actions and Ramming attacks demonstrated a level of aggression that their military analysts had never encountered in previous conquest campaigns. The Imperial intelligence networks began frantic research into this mysterious species called humans, discovering that their homeworld was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld in Galactic databases. These were planets so hostile that survival required constant warfare against predatory life forms, environmental disasters, and resource scarcity. Dr. Myung's xenobiology reports had been transmitted to Earth along with captured Chromax intelligence revealing the true scope of their empire and its military capabilities. Admiral Yijun coordinated with engineers and scientists across human space to develop new weapon systems that could challenge Imperial technology using lessons learned from the first engagement. Engineer Kyungmin's innovations combined with Vellani crystal technology produced hybrid weapons that exceeded anything either species could create. Independently, the enhanced plasma cannons could penetrate Chromax energy shields, while crystal news of the boarding action spread panic throughout the Chromax fleet faster than their communication systems could carry official reports. Alien crew members who had never experienced fear in combat were now abandoning their posts and barricading themselves in storage compartments as human Marines methodically cleared each captured vessel. The sounds of projectile weapons and explosive charges echoed through ships designed for the refined warfare of advanced civilizations. Colonel Tae-hyun led his assault teams through the main corridors of the Chromax flagship, with the systematic efficiency that came from decades of urban warfare training on Earth. His Marines moved in formations that had been tested in the ruins of human cities during the resource wars, using hand signals and tactical coordination that the alien defenders could not predict or counter. The Chromax had built their ship with wide ceremonial passages and high ceilings designed to display their imperial power. But these architectural choices became fatal disadvantages when filled with human soldiers. The elegant curves and artistic decorations provided no cover from projectile weapons, while the open spaces allowed human squads to establish overlapping fields of fire. Engineer Kyungmin's specially designed weapons proved devastatingly effective against alien technology that had never been tested against such primitive brutality. His electromagnetic pulse grenades disabled Chromax energy weapons and life support systems, while his plasma cutting tools could breach any armor the aliens possessed. The human weapons were crude, but perfectly suited for their intended purpose of killing enemies efficiently. Dr. Sora worked in improvised medical stations throughout the captured ship, performing surgery that would have been impossible for most galactic species. Her combat medics used techniques developed during Earth's most violent conflicts, where battlefield medicine meant keeping soldiers alive long enough to continue fighting. Her stimulant injections and emergency procedures allowed wounded humans to remain combat effective despite injuries that should have been fatal. The Chromax crew fought with energy weapons designed for precise, long-range combat, but found these sophisticated tools useless in the cramped corridors of their own ship. Their plasma rifles could penetrate human armor, but the energy discharge would also damage critical ship systems. Their training emphasized minimal collateral damage and surgical precision, which put them at a severe disadvantage against humans who had learned to fight in any environment. Commander Vorthak watched his elite troops fall back through his own ship as human Marines advanced. With relentless determination, the aliens had sophisticated tactical training and superior equipment, but they had never encountered enemies who seemed completely indifferent to their own casualties. Human soldiers would charge through energy weapon fire to reach close combat range, where their primitive weapons became incredibly effective. The psychological impact of human warfare proved even more devastating than their physical attacks. Chromax soldiers were trained to fight according to Galactic conventions with rules of engagement that minimized unnecessary violence. Human Marines ignored these civilized limitations, using psychological warfare, intimidation tactics, and brutal efficiency that broke alien morale. Private Jinho had been a gang enforcer in the slums of New Seoul before joining the Marines, and his street fighting experience proved invaluable against alien opponents who expected civilized combat. He used combat knives, improvised weapons, and hand-to-hand fighting techniques that the Chromax could not comprehend. Their sophisticated military education had never prepared them for enemies who fought like predatory animals. Sergeant Minji coordinated her squad using sign language developed by human special forces, while The aliens relied on electronic communication systems that could be jammed or intercepted. Her team moved through the ship like hunters tracking prey using stealth and ambush tactics that civilized species had abandoned thousands of years ago. The human boarding parties secured critical systems throughout the Chromax flagship, including engineering sections, weapon control centers, and life support systems. Engineer Kyungmin had identified these target areas during his initial scans and provided detailed blueprints that allowed human forces to disable alien capabilities. Systematically, Captain Haewon monitored the space battle from his destroyer while coordinating attacks that would have been considered war crimes by galactic standards. His pilots performed suicide runs against alien vessels using their ships as guided missiles when conventional weapons proved insufficient. The human fleet might have been outnumbered, but they fought with tactics that no civilized species could match. The destroyer Busan Thunder engaged 3 Chromax cruisers, simultaneously using combat maneuvers that violated every principle of safe space navigation. Captain Haewon ordered his ship directly between the enemy vessels at point-blank range, where their energy shields interfered with each other. His weapons might have been primitive, but at zero distance they could penetrate any defense. Dr. Myung's xenobiology team provided crucial intelligence about Chromax physiology, allowing human forces to target alien weak points with maximum effectiveness. Her analysis revealed that the reptilian species had evolved on a world with lower gravity and thinner atmosphere, making them vulnerable to the physical stresses that humans considered normal. The support vessel Incheon Hope served as a mobile command center and medical facility, while Dr. Sora's trauma teams treated wounded humans and processed intelligence gathered from captured aliens. Her interrogation techniques were gentle, by human standards, but proved overwhelmingly effective against species that had never experienced psychological pressure. As the battle continued, the remaining Chromax vessels began retreating from the human fleet, despite their overwhelming numerical and technological advantages. The alien commanders broadcast desperate warnings about these new enemies who fought without regard for galactic conventions or their own safety. Commander Vorthak barricaded himself in his command center, sending panicked reports to the Chromax High Command about the terrifying species that had appeared in response to the Volani distress call. His messages described humans as death-world predators who used warfare tactics that civilized species had never encountered. Flagship Doombringer suffered critical damage as human boarding parties seized control of essential systems. Colonel Taehyun personally led the assault on the command center, using shaped charges to breach the reinforced doors, while his Marines provided covering fire. The final confrontation between human and alien commanders would demonstrate the fundamental differences between civilized warfare and death-world brutality. Within 12 hours of first contact, the mighty Chromax fleet was either destroyed retreating in panic or under human control. The survivors carried stories of these terrifying new enemies back to their empire, while the human fleet began rescue operations for Volani survivors. The battle had introduced humanity to galactic civilization in the most dramatic way possible, proving that sometimes the most primitive species could be the most dangerous. The Chromax Empire would never be the same after encountering the Deathworlders who answered distress calls with overwhelming violence, while the peaceful Volani learned that their plea for help had reached the most unlikely saviors in the galaxy. The surviving Volani emerged from their underground shelters with trembling limbs and expressions of complete bewilderment as they witnessed something that defied all understanding of galactic civilization. The dreaded Chromax Empire fleet that had been systematically exterminating their people for weeks was now retreating in panic from 3 primitive-looking vessels that bore markings from an unknown species. Elder. Thesara led a group of 47 survivors to the surface of their ruined capital city, where crystal spires lay shattered among the smoking craters left by Chromax bombardment. She carried a portable communication device salvaged from their emergency command center and began transmitting messages toward the mysterious ships that had somehow defeated their seemingly invincible enemies. Captain Daeho received the Volani transmission, while his crew worked to secure captured Chromax vessels and provide medical aid to wounded human Marines. The alien voices were filled with gratitude and confusion as they thanked their unknown saviors and requested permission to approach the human fleet. Their leader spoke in the musical tones of their species, expressing wonder at meeting the beings who had answered their desperate call for help. Dr. Myung prepared for first contact with the Villani survivors, using everything her xenobiology team had learned from monitoring alien communications during the battle. She assembled translation protocols, cultural briefings, and medical equipment designed to treat species with radically different physiologies. Her team had studied the alien distress signals, but meeting living representatives would be entirely different. The first meeting took place aboard the support vessel Incheon, Hope, where Dr. Sora had established medical facilities for treating both human and alien casualties. Elder Thassara approached the airlock with careful steps, her tall, graceful form moving with the natural elegance that marked her people as beings who had evolved in low gravity and peaceful environments. The moment of first contact between humans and Villani revealed the dramatic differences between their species. Thassara stood nearly 3 meters tall with thin blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the ship's artificial lighting. Her large purple eyes held intelligence and kindness, but also the trauma of witnessing genocide. Her people had delicate features that spoke of millions of years of peaceful evolution. Dr. Myung greeted the Villani delegation using carefully programmed translation software, while human medical teams provided emergency treatment for alien survivors who were suffering from malnutrition exposure and psychological trauma. The peaceful species had been hiding in underground shelters for weeks without adequate food or medical care. Elder Thassara presented the humans with gifts from her dying civilization, including memory crystals that contained the complete cultural history of the Villani people. She offered their advanced crystal technology, their scientific discoveries, and their artistic achievements as payment for the military intervention that had saved them from extinction. The crystal technology proved far more advanced than anything Earth possessed, using quantum manipulation techniques that could store incredible amounts of information in devices smaller than human fingernails. The Villani had developed crystalline computers that operated on principles human scientists barely understood, and energy systems that could power entire cities using resonance frequencies. Engineer Kyung-min studied the alien technology with fascination, realizing that combining human military innovation with Villani scientific advancement could produce weapons and defensive systems beyond anything either species could create alone. The crystal matrices could enhance human plasma weapons, while Villani energy manipulation could improve Earth defensive shields. Captain Haewon established orbital security around the Villani worlds using captured Chromax vessels alongside the human fleet, while refugee ships carried survivors from the destroyed planets to safer locations. The rescue operation revealed the true scale of the genocide, as millions of Villani had been killed and entire worlds left uninhabitable. Dr. Sora worked with Villani medical specialists to treat wounded members of both species, learning that the peaceful aliens possessed healing techniques that could accelerate human recovery, while human combat medicine could help traumatized Villani survivors cope with the psychological effects of warfare. The celebration of successful rescue was interrupted when long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching the star system. Automated monitoring stations throughout Chromax space had detected the defeat of their conquest fleet and transmitted emergency signals calling for immediate reinforcement. Admiral Yijun realized that humanity had just declared war on one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. Elder Thassara offered to evacuate human personnel to hidden worlds beyond Chromax territory, where both species could rebuild their civilizations in safety. The Villani had maintained secret colonies in remote systems that could provide refuge from imperial retaliation. She assured the humans that her people would be forever grateful for their sacrifice. Captain Daiho had a different response to the approaching threat that shocked both his human crew and their new alien allies. Instead of accepting evacuation or preparing defensive positions, he proposed taking the fight directly to the Chromax home system. His plan was audacious, beyond anything civilized species would consider. The human strategy relied on combining their Deathworld fighting capabilities with Villani technology to create hybrid weapon systems that could challenge the Chromax Empire on their own territory. Engineer Kyungmin's weapons, enhanced with crystal technology, could penetrate any defense, While human tactics supported by Volani intelligence networks could strike at critical enemy installations, Colonel Tai-hyun supported the aggressive strategy, pointing out that the Chromax would never stop hunting them if given time to organize proper retaliation. The Empire had conquered dozens of civilizations through overwhelming force, but they had never faced enemies willing to carry the war to their own worlds. Gader Myung provided intelligence about Chromax society gathered from interrogating captured prisoners, revealing that their empire was built on fear and intimidation, rather than genuine military superiority. Most subject species submitted immediately rather than face destruction, while independent civilizations avoided confrontation through diplomatic neutrality. The Volani were amazed by human willingness to challenge such a powerful enemy, despite having no allies, no knowledge of galactic politics, and no understanding of the forces they would face. Elder Thasara realized that her people had been saved by a species even more remarkable than she had initially understood. As the Chromax reinforcement fleet approached the survivors of both species, prepared for a battle that would determine whether Deathworld determination could overcome Galactic Empire, the humans had proven they could defeat Chromax forces in direct combat, but the approaching fleet represented a significant portion of Imperial military power. The alliance between humans and Volani created new possibilities that neither species could have achieved alone. Crystal-enhanced weapon systems gave human forces devastating firepower, while Volani healing technology allowed wounded Marines to continue fighting. Advanced alien sensors combined with human tactical innovation promised to give their small fleet advantages that raw numbers could not match. Captain Haewon coordinated preparations for the coming battle, while monitoring enemy fleet movements that showed the Chromax approaching with overwhelming numbers. The humans had won their first engagement through surprise and superior tactics, but the enemy would not make the same mistakes twice. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo across the galaxy as news of the human intervention spread to other civilizations. Many species watched with fascination as these unknown Deathworlders prepared to face the Chromax Empire in what promised to be the most significant military engagement in recent galactic history.